February 1945, west of Cologne. The air was brittle with frost. The fields veined with black smoke and the metallic scent of fuel. Through the morning haze, a German Tiger tank crouched beside a hedgerow. Its crew confident, its 80-mm gun pointed toward the ruins ahead. For years, this machine had been their fortress, its armor impenetrable, its name enough to send shivers down enemy lines. Then, a flash, white, silent, distant. A single tungsten cord shell crossed the valley and struck the Tiger square beneath its gun mantlet. The blast tore through the front plate that had once mocked countless Allied rounds. Inside, disbelief turned to silence. The commander's first thought was not of pain, but of confusion. That could not have been a Sherman. The impact was too clean, too sudden, too final. When the smoke cleared, American troops advanced with a new kind of confidence. Behind them stood a weapon few in Europe had yet seen. A long-barreled 90-mm gun, mounted on an M36 Jackson tank destroyer. For the first time in the war, German armor crews faced something they could not outmatch. The era of the Tiger's invincibility was ending. When the Tiger I first rolled onto the battlefields of Leningrad in late 1942, it was more than a tank. It was a declaration. Germany had built the most powerful armored machine of its age. Its 82-mm KWK-36 gun could destroy Allied armor at over a mile. Its armor, layered up to 100 millimeters thick, could shrug off almost anything that dared face it. The Allies had no weapon that could match it. To its crews, the Tiger was both a weapon and a sanctuary. Its steel walls were salvation amid the chaos of war. Its hydraulic turret traverse, its optical precision, all signs of German engineering mastery. When it arrived in Tunisia and the Eastern Front, Allied tank crews whispered its name with dread. Tiger meant you were outgunned before you fired a shot. Reports from the Soviet front were grim. T-34s burned at ranges they could barely see. In North Africa, the British learned the same lesson. Their 6-pounders and Shermans could only scratch the Tiger's hide. By 1943, even American intelligence acknowledged it. The Tiger was not merely a tank. It was a symbol of German invincibility. Its battlefield record justified that fear. At Kursk, Tigers led armored spearheads through fire and mud, absorbing hits that would have destroyed any other vehicle. Their 80-mm guns turned entire Soviet formations into smoking wrecks. In Italy and France, single Tigers held crossroads against overwhelming numbers, delaying entire battalions. But behind that aura of perfection, flaws were already forming. The Tiger was magnificent, but fragile. Its gearbox cracked under strain. Its weight devoured fuel and bridges alike. Its maintenance consumed hours, sometimes days. For every Tiger that fought, another waited for parts that Germany's strained industry could barely supply. Still, the myth persisted. Allied soldiers saw them as unstoppable monsters, invulnerable to their 75-mm shells. Even aircraft pilots reported frustration. Strafing passes that left Tigers scarred, but not broken. The psychological edge was as lethal as the gun itself. By 1944, the Wehrmacht relied on that reputation as much as the machine. When the Tiger appeared, it was not only an armored threat, it was morale itself. Crews believed in it. Generals depended on it. The German propaganda machine celebrated it as proof of Aryan engineering dominance. Yet across the Atlantic, another belief was forming, that the Tiger's reign was not eternal. American engineers and commanders, watching reports from North Africa and Normandy, saw a problem they were determined to solve. If the Tiger was Germany's symbol of power, then the weapon that could destroy it would become America's symbol of innovation. And that weapon was already on the drawing board. A gun that would pierce the Tiger's armor from over 1,000 yards away. By mid-1943, American field reports from Tunisia and Sicily made one fact impossible to ignore. The U.S. Army's 75-mm guns could not reliably penetrate German heavy armor. Sherman crews often had to flank a Tiger, aiming for its thinner rear plates, if they survived long enough to try. What the United States needed was not another tank. It needed a gun that could end the Tiger's myth. That answer came from the engineers of the Watervliet Arsenal and Ordnance Department, who had already produced a formidable anti-aircraft weapon, the 90mm M1. Designed to strike aircraft at 30,000 feet, it delivered extraordinary velocity and precision. Someone asked a simple question. What if this gun could be turned against tanks? Converting that weapon into a ground-firing system required redesigning breech mechanisms, recoil systems, and mounts. But when early ballistic tests were conducted at Aberdeen Proving Ground, the results were unmistakable. At 1,000 yards, the 90mm round could pierce 153 millimeters of armor. It could destroy a Tiger frontally, the first American gun that truly could. From that realization came two vehicles that would redefine late-war armor combat. The first was the M36 Jackson tank destroyer, a long-barreled silhouette atop a Sherman chassis. Its open-topped turret gave gunners wide visibility. Its 90mm M3 cannon could obliterate even the heaviest German tanks. The second was the M26 Pershing, developed under the experimental T-26 program. It was heavier, slower, but designed for one purpose: to meet the Tiger and survive. Both entered service late. In Europe, by the summer of 1944, American factories were running at full tilt, producing Shermans by the tens of thousands, but only a fraction carried the new 90mm gun. Logistics and caution delayed deployment. Commanders feared mixing too many types in combat. Yet, on the front lines, tank crews pleaded for them. Meanwhile, Germany's armored divisions were crumbling. Allied bombing campaigns targeted Panther and Tiger assembly plants, cutting production faster than replacements could reach the field. Still, isolated German units maintained their deadly edge. A single Tiger could halt an entire column. Every new American tank that burned reinforced the legend of its power. In Washington and London, Allied planners knew the coming winter offensive, whatever shape it took, would be the Tiger's last stage. They needed an answer ready before the next push. By late 1944, trains rolled across the Atlantic loaded with freshly built M36 and the first M26 Pershings. Each represented years of trial, error, and engineering obsession condensed into steel. The weapon itself, the 90mm M3, was more than an anti-tank gun. It was a statement of American industrial science: efficient, simple, deadly. Its armor-piercing ammunition used hardened steel caps and tungsten cores designed to maintain velocity over distance. Crews trained to fire, reload, and relocate within seconds, a discipline the Germans, with their complex optics and heavier turrets, often could not match. When these guns arrived on the Western Front, they brought more than firepower. They brought balance. The men who had once fought with outdated Shermans suddenly held something equal to, and in many cases greater than, their enemy's best weapon. The Tiger's aura of invincibility began to fade, the first time one burned under a 90mm strike. And soon, the Germans would see it happen with their own eyes. The battlefield. Confrontation between the Tiger Y and America's 90mm gun was not merely a duel of machines. It was the meeting point of two philosophies of war. Germany's Tiger was conceived as an apex predator, heavily armored, methodically engineered, and designed for shock value. Its 88mm KWK-36 gun could penetrate most Allied tanks before they came into range. Its armor, a towering front glacis of 100mm, had been proof against every Allied weapon of 1942. On paper, it should have remained untouchable. America's 90mm system approached war differently. It represented efficiency over excess. The U.S. did not build tanks as monuments to power. It built them as tools of victory. The 90mm M3 cannon had higher muzzle velocity than the Tiger's 88 mm. It fired an armor-piercing round at over 2,800 feet per second, striking with kinetic force that even German engineers found difficult to counter. In battle, that difference was decisive. Where the Tiger relied on its thickness of armor, the 90 mm relied on speed and precision. American gunners learned to engage at long range, 1,200, 1,500, sometimes even 2,000 yards. When the tungsten core M82 or HVAP rounds struck, they punched through frontal armor that had once been considered invincible. Yet, it wasn't only about penetration. The Tiger was complex. Its 56-ton chassis strained transmissions, and its gun traverse was slow under engine power. The M36 Jackson, lighter and faster, could reposition and fire from ambush before a Tiger could bring its barrel to bear. In open terrain, the Tiger dominated. In fluid movement, the Americans held the edge. And then there was production. By late 1944, fewer than 1,300 Tigers had been built. In that same period, the United States produced over 2,300 M36 Jacksons and over 49,000 Shermans. Even if only a fraction carried the 90 mm, the math was clear. Germany built masterpieces. America built momentum. On the Western Front, this contrast became brutally visible. In towns like Cologne, Wesel, and Remagen, the first M36s entered combat alongside Shermans. German tankers, who once fired with certainty, began hesitating. They no longer knew which silhouette hid the long 90 mm barrel. The 90 mm gun was not simply a weapon. It was the end of an illusion. The myth of German armored invincibility, born at Kursk and carried to Normandy, met the cold geometry of industrial warfare. For the Tiger, power had been personal, a single machine holding a village. For America, power had become collective. Thousands of engines, factories, and men aimed in one direction. And when those worlds collided, the Tiger's supremacy began to crumble. To German crews, the Tiger had once been a fortress of certainty, a machine that could turn fear into control. Inside its thick armor, they felt untouchable, confident that any Allied tank facing them would die first. The sound of an 80 mm round leaving the barrel carried with it a sense of inevitability. For 2 years, that confidence had shaped German strategy and morale alike. But when the first 90 mm guns appeared, that illusion began to break. Quietly at first, then all at once. Reports from the Western Front filtered back to command units. Tigers destroyed at long range by unknown American gunfire. Gunners described penetrations through the frontal plate, a place once considered sacred. Commanders refused to believe it until wrecks began arriving at repair depots, pierced clean through the mantelet. For the first time, Tiger crews went into battle uncertain. They camouflaged, moved cautiously, and fired from cover. A change in behavior that spoke volumes. The sense of dominance that had defined Germany's Panzer Corps since 1942 was slipping away. Even the mere rumor of a new American tank destroyer with a long gun could stall an advance. For U.S. crews, the shift was transformative. The same men who had once fought with desperation, maneuvering Shermans in suicidal flanking runs, now fought with balance. They could hold ground, not just seize it. They could face a Tiger head-on and survive. The arrival of the 90 meters turned fear into discipline. American soldiers began to trust their machines again. Strategically, the change went beyond morale. The 90 mm allowed U.S. forces to engage German armor on equal terms, which reshaped the tempo of combat. Commanders like Omar Bradley and Courtney Hodges began deploying tank destroyer battalions not as support, but as armored spearheads capable of halting counterattacks. At the same time, German divisions lost their decisive weapon. The Tiger, once the battlefield's psychological anchor, became a liability. Too few, too heavy, too slow to adapt. And yet, for the German engineers who had built it, the true shock was existential. They had believed their craftsmanship would overcome America's mass production. But standing in the ruins of Cologne or the Ardennes, they saw something different. The cold truth that quantity had become its own quality. For the men on both sides, the war had changed. It was no longer about who built the better tank. It was about who could build enough of them fast enough and arm them with the gun that ended the Tiger's reign. March 6, 1945. Cologne, Germany. The city lay in ruins. Smoke rose from hollowed towers. Rubble filled the streets once lined with cathedrals and trams. It was here, amid shattered stone and falling ash, that the Tiger's myth met its end. Down a wide boulevard near the cathedral, a German Tiger. I waited, its barrel leveled between the broken columns of a department store. Across the open square, American tanks moved cautiously. A platoon of M26 Pershings, newly arrived from Antwerp. Their crews were young, but their machine was new, armed with the 90mm M3 gun. The German commander saw them first. Through the Zeiss optics, the Pershing looked unfamiliar. Longer, lower, more menacing than a Sherman. He fired. The shells screamed across the square, striking stone. Dust engulfed the Pershing. Seconds later, its gun fired back. The 90mm round hit the Tiger below the turret ring, tearing through armor once thought untouchable. The Tiger's engine died in smoke and flame. The brief exchange lasted less than 20 seconds, yet it marked a turning point for armored warfare. American combat cameramen captured it. A single piece of film that would become one of the most iconic recordings of the war. The Cologne tank duel. For German crews, that image was a revelation. The Tiger, their invincible machine, had been destroyed in open combat by an American tank. No flanking maneuver, no lucky shot, just superior firepower and precision. At the same time, to the Americans watching that footage in command tents across the Rhine, it was vindication. The years of engineering, the debates over production delays, the urgency to field a gun that could pierce German steel, all of it had led to this moment. A few days later, near Remagen, as U.S. forces crossed the Ludendorff Bridge under artillery fire, the story repeated itself. German Tiger IIs, the massive Königstigers, tried to hold the western bank. Their armor, nearly 180 millimeters thick, had been designed to laugh at enemy shells. But when the 90mm HVAP rounds struck, even these giants shuddered. Reports from the 14th Tank Destroyer Battalion noted Tigers destroyed at 200 yards, something unthinkable a year earlier. Every engagement chipped away at Germany's armored legend. Crews abandoned tanks rather than risk immolation. Others dug them into static positions, turning the once mobile weapon of blitzkrieg into a desperate fortress. In the streets of Cologne, the smell of burning oil lingered long after the smoke cleared. The Tiger had fallen, not by luck, but by evolution. By the spring of 1945, the pattern was unmistakable. Wherever German armor appeared, it was now hunted. On the Western Front, American tank destroyer battalions, newly equipped with M36 Jacksons and M26 Pershings, began operating with surgical precision. Instead of retreating from contact, they set ambushes, open fields, crossroads, ridge lines. The 90mm guns were dug in, camouflaged, and coordinated with artillery observers. When a Tiger or Panther entered their range, its fate was sealed before it could fire. Reports from the 703rd Tank Destroyer Battalion near the Siegfried Line describe it clearly. Enemy heavy tank destroyed with first round, 2,200 yards. The message was factual, emotionless, but behind the words lay a profound shift. The fear that once paralyzed Allied tank crews had evaporated. American gunners now held the advantage of both firepower and initiative. For the German panzer divisions, the shock ran deeper than steel. Their entire doctrine, Schwerpunkt, the idea of concentrated armored thrusts, depended on the Tiger's ability to punch through and dominate. Without that invincibility, their strategy collapsed. Even the elite SS Panzer Corps, once feared for their offensive coordination, were reduced to defensive rearguards, burning their own machines to keep them from capture. The Tiger II, introduced in 1944 as a last attempt to regain superiority, proved too little and too late. Its immense weight shattered bridges. Its fuel consumption crippled mobility. Many were lost, not in battle, but to mechanical failure or air attack. In contrast, the 90mm armed American vehicles kept moving. Across rivers, through forests, into cities. Their mechanical reliability became their most powerful weapon. German soldiers began describing a new kind of fear, the silent kill. The 90mm high-velocity shell traveled faster than sound could warn them. One moment, a tank was alive. The next, it was smoke and debris. The psychological reversal was complete. At the strategic level, Allied command exploited this turning tide. With heavy armor neutralized, U.S. infantry could advance behind mechanized screens that no longer feared German counterattacks. In February and March 1945 alone, over 500 German tanks were destroyed or abandoned across the Rhine corridor. American losses, though still costly, no longer came from hopeless duels. By the time the Allies reached the Ruhr Pocket, German tank crews had stopped referring to their Tigers as invincible. They called them coffins. Fuel shortages left many motionless, waiting for artillery or airstrikes to finish what the 90mm guns had begun. In less than a year, the weapon that started as an adaptation of an anti-aircraft gun had redefined the battlefield. The Tiger's roar, once the sound of German dominance, had been replaced by the thunder of American firepower and the hum of mass production. From the fields of Normandy to the ruins of Cologne, the Tiger's reign was over, and in its place stood the symbol of America's new kind of warfare. Precise, relentless, industrial. When the 90mm gun entered widespread service in early 1945, it did more than change outcomes on the battlefield. It changed how the United States fought war. For nearly 3 years, U.S. armor units had lived with a quiet disadvantage. The Sherman was dependable, but its 75mm and 76mm guns had struggled against German heavies. Every encounter with a Tiger or Panther required courage that bordered on sacrifice. Crews had learned to outflank, to swarm, to strike from the sides. It was bravery born from necessity. But after the 90mm arrived, that equation reversed. For the first time, American tank destroyer and armored divisions could confront Germany's most formidable tanks directly. At the tactical level, it simplified battle plans, no longer did. Commanders need to choreograph risky encirclements or air support to take down a single Tiger. A well-positioned M36 or Pershing could do it alone. This new confidence spread quickly through the ranks. Soldiers began trusting their machines again, and with trust came aggression. Units like the 776th Tank Destroyer Battalion at Cologne and the 702nd near Remagen demonstrated how fast U.S. armor could now maneuver under fire. They no longer avoided open ground. They claimed it. To the German side, the effect was devastating. Every destroyed Tiger was not just a tactical loss, it was a psychological collapse. Those tanks had been symbols of dominance, morale, and even propaganda. When they began burning on roadsides, the message to every German soldier was unmistakable. The Reich's technological edge was gone. Behind the front lines, U.S. engineers and ordnance officers studied each wrecked Tiger and Panther with almost scientific fascination. They measured armor thickness, analyzed penetration holes, and logged every angle of impact. The results confirmed what experience had already proven. The 90mm M3, with its new AP and HVAP rounds, could defeat any German tank then in service at ranges well beyond the 80mm comfort zone. In the skies above, this ground superiority synchronized with air dominance. P-47, Thunderbolts, and P-51 Mustangs swept the roads, while the 90mm crews handled what survived below. The coordination between air and armor became a template for post-war doctrine. Mobility supported by overwhelming precision firepower. The logistical story was equally telling. American factories had produced over 2,000 90mm guns by early 1945, each simpler to manufacture than Germany's 80mm. Standardized parts meant that a damaged Jackson or Pershing could be repaired in hours, not days. German mechanics, facing shortages of everything from transmissions to fuel, could only envy that speed. By the time Allied forces encircled the Ruhr industrial heartland in April 1945, the Tiger, once the terror of Europe, had become a relic. Many were abandoned intact, engines empty, crews gone. They stood silent in muddy fields as columns of Pershings and Shermans rolled past, their barrels steady, their turrets turning with mechanical ease. The battlefield balance had shifted permanently, and the weapon that achieved it was not born from arrogance, but from necessity, refinement, and sheer American adaptability. When the war ended in May 1945, the Allied armies began a new kind of battle. One fought not with shells, but with reports, evaluations, and data. The Tiger, once a battlefield legend, was now a study subject. Engineers from the U.S. Army Ordnance Department, the British Ministry of Supply, and even Soviet liaison officers inspected captured tanks across Europe. They measured armor angles, gun mantlets, penetration marks, and they compared them to the holes carved by the 90mm. The findings were unambiguous. America's new gun had not only matched the Tiger's 88mm, it had surpassed it. The 90mm's high-velocity shell retained its energy better over distance. It was easier to produce, simpler to maintain, and adaptable across platforms, from tank destroyers to the emerging next generation of main battle tanks. One post-war analysis from the Armored Board at Fort Knox described it plainly. The 90mm M3 has rendered the heavy German tank concept strategically obsolete. Future design should emphasize mobility, fire control, and rate of fire rather than excessive armor. In that single sentence lay the foundation for post-war doctrine. The lessons of the Tiger and the 90mm shaped everything that came next. The M46 Patton, M47, and M48 all carried evolved versions of the same weapon, refined through experience on the fields of Europe. The Germans themselves recognized the shift. Former panzer commanders like Heinz Guderian and Hasso von Manteuffel, interviewed after the war, admitted that by 1945, the Allies had finally achieved technological parity and logistical supremacy. Guderian famously remarked that Germany had over-designed itself into defeat. The Tiger had been magnificent, but it was unsustainable. Meanwhile, in American training films and textbooks, the 90mm became a symbol of problem-solving under pressure, proof that industrial democracy could outthink authoritarian rigidity. Officers studied how a weapon originally built to shoot planes could, with the right engineering and vision, end the reign of the most feared tank in history. Even the Soviets took note. Their post-war designs, the T-54 and T-55, bore evidence of studying the Pershing's armor layout and the ballistic performance of the 90mm gun. The race for the next generation of tank warfare had begun, and it started with lessons learned from those few months of combat in 1945. For historians, the story of the 90mm is less about a single weapon and more about an idea that adaptability wins wars. The gun was not the product of a single genius or factory. It was the collective achievement of thousands of engineers, machinists, and gunners across the American arsenal network. When veterans of the 3rd Armored Division returned home, they spoke less about the thrill of battle and more about relief. That finally, they had gone to war with a weapon that gave them a fair chance. The Tiger had ruled by fear. The 90mm ended that rule with reason, precision, and sheer industrial will. In the ruins of post-war Europe, the burned hulks of Tigers and Panthers stood like monuments to a vanished age, relics of a war that had devoured brilliance and arrogance in equal measure. Their massive turrets pointed aimlessly toward the horizon, silent reminders of a time when one nation believed perfection could outweigh persistence. The 90mm gun told a different story. It was not beautiful, nor elegant, nor built to inspire awe. It was built to work. Its steel was forged not in a single workshop of genius, but in hundreds of anonymous factories, by men and women who would never see the front. It represented the industrial soul of America's war effort. Practical, relentless, collective. When historians look back, they often describe World War II as a contest of ideologies, fascism versus freedom, tyranny versus democracy. But on the ground, it was also a contest of adaptation. The Tiger embodied a faith in singular superiority. The 90mm embodied the opposite, a belief that progress is constant and that even the mightiest weapons can be overcome by innovation. For the German crews who once believed their armor was eternal, the sight of a 90mm shell tearing through that illusion was more than defeat. It was revelation. Warfare was no longer about the individual tank or the heroic duel. It was about systems, logistics, precision, and the quiet intelligence of engineers solving yesterday's problems faster than the enemy could invent new ones. In that sense, the end of the Tiger's reign marked more than the fall of a weapon. It marked the dawn of a new era, one where technology would evolve too quickly for myths to survive, and where the advantage would belong not to those who built the strongest machine, but to those who could build the next one. The 90mm gun was never worshipped, never mythologized, never given a name to strike fear. But it achieved something greater. It restored balance, shattered illusion, and proved that ingenuity, when guided by necessity, could humble even the most formidable power on Earth. In the end, it wasn't noise or glory that ended the Tiger's reign. It was the quiet precision of progress, measured, deliberate, unstoppable.